To another fabulous edition of the Daily Power Parsha. I'm your host, Rabbi Ari, and you are you, which is good because we need you. Everyone needs you, and you need you to be you. All right, so today is Tuesday. Torah portion is Veschanan, and we're going to explore the third reading of the Torah portion. But first, what we're going to do is I'm going to share a few insights into yesterday's reading. So this is what I like to call the bonus round from yesterday, because there are some themes that are really, really powerful and important to take a deeper dive. And a lot of it actually meshes with the teachings of Kabbalah. So I have now opened up, hopefully you should see it, the Torah text, just to show you what we're doing here. I'm going to scroll up to the top, all the way to the top. So again, Torah reading for Ve'et Hanan, second reading, which corresponds to Monday, which was yesterday, and it's Deuteronomy chapter 4. So just so you know where we are in context. The verse that I want to focus on is number 35. This verse right here. And in the Hebrew, it's a fairly famous verse. Ata hare saladas. You have, but we'll do the English. This is Moses speaking to the people about the events at Mount Sinai. You have been shown the events at Mount Sinai, Revelation, in order to know that the Lord is God. The Lord, He is God. Okay, that's a little bit of a weird translation. The Lord is God. There is none else besides Him. There is so much to unpack in this verse, and this verse is discussed at length in the works of Kabbalah and Chabad Hasidic philosophy. I want to share with you some relevant insights. Number one, the notion of Mount Sinai being a revelation. We call it the revelation at Sinai. This comes from various verses, including this one right here. You know, typically we think about Sinai. What happened at Mount Sinai? The Jewish people got the Ten Commandments. They heard God speaking the Ten Commandments. Well, that's hearing, not seeing. But in truth, there was a spectacle, a sight spectacle as well. In fact, the Torah tells us that the Jewish people saw the sounds. Right? Typically we hear sounds. They were able to see, to visualize the sounds. And I know some people talk about how they're able to see sound and visualize sound waves, and you can maybe put colors to different sounds. I don't know exactly what that experience was, right? Although all of our souls were there, I don't consciously remember it, so I can't tell you firsthand what it was like. Maybe you can tell me what it was like if you remember. But this is what we know. We know that they were able to ro'im et hakolot. They were able to see the sounds. And there's such a beautiful idea, there's such a beautiful message with when regarding that idea. You see, the difference between seeing and hearing is as follows. Seeing is believing. Hearing is not necessarily believing. Let me give you an example. If you see something, right, so you know it to be true. Why? Because you saw it with your own eyes. If somebody tells you something, are you 100% sure that it happened? You're not 100% sure. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. So somebody tells you, one story. Okay, sounds believable. What happens if somebody tells you a contradictory story? So now what? So now you're stuck, because one person said this and one person said that. So what are you going to do? Who are you going to believe? It's complicated. Why? Because you didn't see it. But if you saw it, and somebody tells you, no, you didn't see it, what are you going to tell them? Thank you very much. I saw it. What do you mean I didn't see it? I literally saw it. I was driving down the country road, and I saw the spaceship with the light, and it sucked up the cow from the road. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. You're going to tell me I didn't see it? I'm kidding about that. Or maybe I'm not kidding. It doesn't matter, right? Because now you're hearing me tell a story, so who knows? Because hearing is not believing, but seeing is believing. So that's why, by the way, in Jewish law, there's a very interesting law that says, Ein Eid Na'aseh Dayan, which means that a witness can never be a judge on that case. If a judge happens to be a witness to a crime, that judge cannot sit on that case. Why? Because the judge is no longer objective. The judge knows what they saw, and that's it. You're not open to any consideration. A judge, per Jewish law, has to be objective. Has to be open to hearing both sides. As implausible maybe as one side is, or as false as one side is, the judge still needs to be able to hear it objectively and then make a determination. Who's right, who's wrong, what's truth and what's not true. But when we see something, our objectivity is out. Seeing is believing. So what happened at Sinai, get this, was that they saw the sounds. What does that mean, they saw the sounds? What's usually heard as a rumor, they saw with absolute certainty. So what's rumor and what's certain? So in our lives, what's certain is the table in front of us, right? The computer or the phone in front of us. Physical stuff is what's certain. And God, a rumor, I think, I believe, maybe, I heard, I prayed, right? God, spirituality is the unknown, is what we hear, not what we typically see. At Sinai, it was such a moment of spiritual, divine, godly clarity. The people saw the sounds, what's normally heard, God, right? Spirituality. What's normally heard, they saw with absolute clarity. That was true to them. We call this an epiphany, where something that you might have thought about before or might have proclaimed to believe in, when it becomes absolutely certain, without a shadow of a doubt, that's what we call an epiphany, and that's what happened at Mount Sinai. The people who were there, the people who were gathered, had a clarity, an absolute clarity about the truth of God. So, this is, again, one explanation of one word. You have been shown. What's the shown? Absolute clarity, absolute certainty. Now, it doesn't preclude the possibility for a human being to forget what they saw and to lose the intensity of an epiphany, right? It happens all the time. People have clarity, an absolute clarity, and a week later, that's it. They're back in the place of who knows what, forgetting that clarity. Happens all the time, right? A beautiful moment happens in our lives, a very special moment, and we're uplifted. Or maybe, God forbid, the opposite of a beautiful moment, maybe a very sad moment, and we become very serious. How long does it last? How long does it last, those epiphanies? So we know by Sinai it lasted 40 days, and then they were dancing around the golden calf. So in life, there are no guarantees that even an epiphany will last forever, but that's what it was. It was the showing of true reality, the showing of truth, of God's absolute truth. But we need to go a little bit further and deeper in this verse, because what it says specifically in the verse is you've been shown why, what's the purpose, what's the objective, in order to know that the Lord is God. Now, this doesn't work in the English, because what does it mean that the Lord is God? That sounds like a word salad. But in Hebrew, it's very meaningful. What we've been shown to know is, key, that Hashem, this is God's four-letter name, the name that we don't pronounce the way it's written, that Hashem is Elokim. Now, these are two names of God. Hashem, or Havaya, in Kabbalah it's referred to as Havaya and Elokim. So, what the Torah is saying, what Moshe is saying to the people is that at Sinai, you saw the truth, that Hashem is Elokim. And all of the biblical scholars of the last few hundred years who promoted the documentary hypothesis that the Torah has multiple authors because of various names of God are now, I don't know what they do with this verse, but I'll tell you this, that the premise of that hypothesis, the documentary hypothesis, is that the different names of God represent different authors. But what Moshe says is, different authors, what are you talking about? The whole point of Sinai is to realize that the two names are really one, that Hashem is Elokim. What does that mean? So Hashem is usually the name associated with divine transcendence. Elokim is associated with divine immanence. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Miracles versus nature. Transcendence versus reality as we know it. Infinite versus limitation. So God has the power of infinity, because God's not limited by finite reality. At the same time, God also creates a finite reality. And in that reality is God's energy that's invested in a limited box of creation. So God is both beyond and within. And the point of this verse is that at Sinai, Moses says, you and I saw, we all saw, that there's only one God, right? The infinite is also the finite. The God of the miracle is also the God of nature. The same force that runs everything. It's one God that has both modalities and both powers, and it's not even two modalities, it's one essence that expresses itself in multiple ways. There's the power of, for example, a very crude example when it comes to a person. You have the power to open your hands and the power to close it. Two hands? No, one hand. Two people? No, one person. It's one person with two abilities. So God has the ability to infinitely give and also to limit. The message for us is that God is with us in the moments of beauty and in the moments of difficulty. In the moments of expansiveness, when we feel that everything is going great, when we feel blessed by God, and also in those moments of constriction, in the moments that we feel like things are a little bit more difficult. God is with us in both. It's the same God through thick and thin. Okay, so those are those are some ideas that are taught in Kabbalah regarding this verse 35. Now there's another verse that is very similar, just 4 verses later, verse 39. Look at what Moses says. Well, that's okay. This 35 is saying what you were shown at Sinai. That's what you learned at Sinai. And Moses says, don't forget it today. And you shall know this day. In other words, today. And consider it in your heart, that same deal, that the Lord, He is God. Same duality in the Hebrew. Hashem is Elokim. Those two names are really one. Both in the heaven above and upon the earth below. There is none else. And that also is just a huge deal. So, again, just to clarify, Moses is saying that what happened at Sinai is that you saw this truth, that there's only God who's one, that God is in charge of everything, both the big stuff and the small stuff. There's one absolute truth that runs everything. That's what you saw at Sinai. Then Moses turns to the people in his final address, and he says, don't forget it. You learned it then, you saw it then. As I said before, epiphanies are easy come, easy go. Don't drop it. Don't forget it. You shall know today and take it to heart. In other words, whatever it takes for you with meditation, study, prayer, whatever it takes to get yourself into that space of realization, get yourself into that space, because that is how we're meant to live, with the knowledge that that the Lord is God, that Hashem is Elokim. There's only one force in control of both the infinite and the finite, miraculous and nature, big and small. It's all God. Above and below, there is none else, which reminds me of a story. The idea of there's none else. There was once a chassid, a Chabad person, a person of the Chabad persuasion, back in Russia, who was a businessman. He was, I forget which business he was, but he was a businessman, and he was making an accounting. This is before QuickBooks and before other software. So he was handwriting in his ledger, the finances, and he's calculating everything, the profits and the losses, all that stuff. And at the last line, on the bottom line, it was supposed to put what the total is, the difference between the profits and the losses. How much money did he make this year or this month? However long the period of accounting was for. And in that space, the bottom line, he wrote the words, Ein od milvado. There is nothing else besides for God. That's what he wrote. That's it. There's only God. And it's what kind of business is this? In the middle of business. So his business partner said to him, "What are you doing? I mean, it's nice to think about God, but we have to make an accounting here." He says, "Look, when I think about business in the middle of speaking to God, no one says anything. So now I'm thinking of God in the middle of business. Now it's a problem. If it works that way, it could work the other way also." Anyway, the point is that in truth he was right. There is nothing else besides for God. At the end of the day, what I made, what I lost, I guess it matters on some level, but in the bigger picture, God's in control anyway. How long are we here for anyway? If you take a really big step back, the most important thing is to know that God's in control, and that there's nothing as important as living a life true to God. Okay, so that's what I wanted to finish up from yesterday's discussion. It was a very long reading, and we didn't get a chance to cover those things. Now we move to the third reading, which is a much shorter reading, and I just want to share maybe one or two insights on this one. So,
Sorry,
yeah, Mark.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you talked about the pillar of fire and all that,
Yeah.
with front of the Israelites and behind him, how a man we were carrying as a man carries his son. What I saw in Rashi, I think I sent that to you. It said when God went in front of us to protect us, when he went in front of us, he was a God of judgment, Elohim. But when he was behind us to protect us from the arrows and the boulders being hurled at us, he was a God of mercy because he's protecting us. And these were two different aspects of Hashem and Elohim.
Yes, exactly.
Hashem, mercy, Elohim is a God of judgment.
Yes, yes, exactly, 100%. And Kabbalah explains how mercy and justice correspond to the same two forces that I mentioned before, the idea of expansion and contraction. Mercy is typically more of a giving modality, more of a generous modality, whereas justice is more of a discerning. It's more of a tighter posture. You're judging. You're being judgmental. So it corresponds exactly to the same two forces. But thank you for pointing that out. Okay, now up to the third reading, and here the Torah steps out of the first person of Moses. It steps in and out a few times in the book of Deuteronomy, and it tells us once again, the narrator is telling us what Moses did. Then Moses decided to separate the three cities on the side of the Jordan toward the sunrise, so that a murderer might flee there. Okay, so basically we know, I think we discussed a few weeks ago about the cities of refuge. This is a place where somebody who took a life inadvertently, unintentionally, has the opportunity to flee for safety and for reflection. So there were 6 cities meant to be separated or designated as cities of refuge in the Holy Land in Israel. But now, on the other side of the Jordan, remember there's 2.5 tribes settling on this side of the Jordan River, on the east side of the Jordan. So Moses separates 3 cities for this area of land that some tribes would inherit. So, what happens if somebody takes a life by accident out here? So Moses himself separates and designates these 3 cities as cities of refuge. Again, what context? Somebody who murders his fellow man unintentionally, maybe murder is the wrong word there, kills his fellow man unintentionally, but did not hate him in time past, that he may flee to one of these cities so that he may live. On a simple level, it means that somebody who took a life by accident, so the family of the victim might seek retribution. So this was a place where it would be a safe zone to flee and to live without fear of that reprisal. On a deeper level, so that he may live means also that the person might reflect that the fact that somebody's death came through their hands is certainly not accident, even if it was unintentional. There are no accidents in God's world. It means that on some level, the person was culpable to the extent that loss of life happened through their hands. Whatever that means, somebody died at that person's hands, and that itself is cause for some reflection and introspection. And so, going to the city of refuge, where a person had the opportunity to kind of be separated from others and whatever. So that was a place of reflection and that personal work that needed to be done. And then the Torah lists the cities: Bezer, Ramot, and Golan. These are the 3 cities of refuge. And then then the last part of this reading talks about, actually it's a setup for the next reading, tomorrow's reading. This is the teaching which Moses set before the children of Israel, the testimony, statutes, and ordinances, and this is all an introduction for Moses talking to the people and repeating the 10 Commandments. 40 years earlier at Sinai, God gave us the 10 Commandments. 40 years later, at the border of Israel, Moses reiterates the 10 Commandments. I'm going to jump ahead to reading number 4 and show you this, if it's going to cooperate here, the internet, that is. No. There we go. I am the Lord your God. You see? 10 Commandments, right here. So in the next reading, Moses will repeat the 10 Commandments. Moses is going to say, this is what God said to us, and he's going to quote God and say the 10 Commandments. But before we get there, I want to focus again for another minute on the cities of refuge. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, but it's important to mention again that the person, the one who killed, would be in the city of refuge until the high priest died. Until the high priest died. The question is why? Why that? That seems like an arbitrary designation. The sentence of city of refuge is until at such point the high priest dies, the Kohen Gadol. Why? What's the connection? So it says the Chinuch, Sefer HaChinuch, who explains all the mitzvot, he explains rationally that the family of the victim might seek retribution, feeling that this was an injustice. Their loved one died for no reason. This person was culpable. This person was responsible for it. Even if it was unintentional, doesn't matter. They need to pay the price. And they feeling alone in their grief that makes the grief that much more severe, and they may be more likely to do something violent, God forbid, against the one who inadvertently took the life of their loved one. But but people feel that their own loss is soothed when they feel like their loss is shared by others. So when the community as a whole is experiencing a loss, the loss of the high priest, who was the leader of the entire people, the spiritual leader of the entire people, when the high priest passes away and everybody is in a state of mourning, that mourning, psychologically, this is the way the Chinuch explains, somehow mitigates, somehow neutralizes, minimizes the acute pain that the family of that victim feels for their loss. Although certainly they feel the loss, but they feel like the fact that everyone is mourning, that takes away that from the edge of their own loss, and they're less likely to seek violence and retribution for the one who took the life of their loved one, seeing as everybody is collectively in a state of mourning. So I think the takeaway message from that, I thought it was an interesting insight and I wanted to share with you, but I think a takeaway is how important it is to share in each other's sorrows. Not that, God forbid, we look for our own tragedies in the face of other tragedies, but in general, I think that take us half a step back, the bigger message is that when we feel alone in suffering, that's when it feels the worst. But knowing that others empathize, knowing that others are sharing somehow in that burden and that pain, can make it feel a little bit better. So let's be there for others and let's empathize. So I'll summarize quickly what we talked about today. Number one, the idea of Sinai being the vision. When we saw God, when we saw the truth, it wasn't just a rumor that God exists, that God created the world, that God is, that's going to melt. Hold on one second. I need to stop something from happening. That's going to melt. That's going to melt. Yeah. Okay. You need to put it on paper or just keep it on this stove? Yeah, put it back on the stove. That's your safest bet. Okay. All right. Let's go. So we were shown. Shouldn't just be a rumor, something that we hear, but something that we see, a truth, that God is true. That's the epiphany, and Moses says, make it last. Rediscover that. I told you the story about the chassid who wrote Eino Movado, there's nothing else besides for God, on the bottom line of his business accounting. And we also need to remember, we got to also make sure we know where the finances are, but at the end of the day, there's really nothing else, other than God. And we spoke about the cities of refuge, and the fact that Moses created 3 cities of refuge on the eastern side of the Jordan, in his territory, and the meaning of why the sentence is until the high priest passes away, because that's a loss that's shared by everyone, which neutralizes the pain felt by the victim's family. And the message takeaway for us is, let us be there for others to alleviate their pain. All right, thank you very much for joining me today for Daily Power Parsha. Hope you found it uplifting and inspiring and informative. Remember, tonight is Torah study, 7:30 p.m., special Tuesday edition. I hope to see you then. The subject is, what's the subject? The metaphysics of sound. I spoke a little bit about seeing and hearing today, this morning, or this afternoon, but tonight we have a full discussion about the metaphysics of sound, 7:30 to 8:30 tonight. Torah studies live. If you have the link, great. If not, feel free to reach out. I can give it to you. All right. See you all. Have a wonderful day, and stay healthy. Stay well. Bye, everyone.